Hey everybody, this is Game Freak 10124. Welcome back to more Let's Play Pokemon Gale Darkness extra video.
Stuck in a pocket. They decide to bury the hatchet if they ever get out, and SpongeBob saves them. And Plankton immediately backstabs him to nab the drill and dig back up, but because of all the holes, the Krusty Krab collapses. Every character just feels very off. I just miss the old SpongeBob at this point. 23. No hat for Pat. The hat boomerang is a funny way to start this one, but it's another episode where Patrick tries to get a job. He lands one of the Krusty Krab by holding a sign to attract tourists, but once he gets the hat, he's nervous and he can't stand up. Everyone finds it so funny that Krabs hires him to be a clown for extra money, but this only works for so long, so Krabs adds in a pie. As you can imagine, Patrick is a hot mess. The next day, he's supposed to fall into spikes, but Squidward and Patrick fall in and they're totally fine, so the customers get a refund. There's much better Patrick Gets a Job episodes, but this one is okay. 22.
I like the episode, but at the same time, I agree with him on that one.
Gone. Everyone is missing.
I love this one. This is one of the... to me, it's such an iconic, newer SpongeBob era, not classic SpongeBob era episode.
The episode has a very dark undertone to it that I'm really digging. So what does SpongeBob do? Instead of leaving town to see what might have happened, he lives everyone's lives for them. That sounds like a really bad idea, but hey, he's able to give himself a driver's license.
But yeah, it's such a good episode, and it's another one of the shorter ones, I think.
And his boat turned into his girl/boyfriend, but oh my, SpongeBob reveals he's been talking to Patrick made out of Krabby Patties behind the boat's back. And yep, he's officially lost it.
Sigh. I need to freaking heal. Let me see. You got nothing else, so...
No worries though. SpongeBob learns everyone left for National No SpongeBob Day. Well, I guess the ending is more creative than it was all just a dream. The concept of being all alone is interesting, and it's a fairly enjoyable one to watch despite it having not much humor at all. 21.
I kind of bigged it ever, but at the same time, yeah, not too much. There's some humor in there, I will say, but I can't give it too much more credit than that myself, even though I do love the episode.
SpongeBob tries to do everything at once. Hey, that's me. Sadie needs help with a machine, Mr. Krabs can't put a telescope together, and it's Patrick's birthday. To say the least, he struggles to keep up with all his commitments. We've seen plots similar to this in previous seasons, but this time his pals are being aggressive, which is a little annoying. By the end, they catch him and he admits he extended himself too much, so Sandy makes a couple of clones of him. While I like the episode, making clones feels like the easy way out. 20. The Slumber Party. Pearl is
This is another good episode.
Upcoming Slumber Party. Mr. Krabs made a bunch of rules that Pearl's supposed to follow. These are really funny if you actually read them. No laughing and no eating after midnight. That's a fun little Gremlins reference. So Pearl kicks out Mr. Krabs and stays in SpongeBob.
Come on, why do you freaking miss the high jump kick? Stupid RNG crap.
Really funny if you actually read them. No laughing and no eating after midnight. That's a fun little Gremlins reference. So Pearl kicks out Mr. Krabs and stays in SpongeBob. They end up watching a scary movie about a slumber party at home. So Mr. Krabs, going to what he tends to do, forces SpongeBob to break in. which destroys his house. There isn't anything too remarkable about this episode, but it was fun enough to watch. I was kind of surprised to see Krabs actually pay for a private party to make him when done. 19. Hard. SpongeBob goes to the bank and throws a fit about how the bills look. Poor Quincy. I can't believe he's got to put up with this crap. But SpongeBob gets the money to buy some Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy cards. He wants to get the rare hologram card, so he buys all the decks in the store besides one. And the last one is what Patrick grabs, which of course has that rare hologram card. Patrick goes around, almost causing damage to the card 1,000 different ways, and tells SpongeBob that he can have it at the end of the day. I honestly feel like SpongeBob in a sense with some of my retro consoles. I've got a couple of rare ones that I treat with lots of respect and care, so I feel his pain. It's very irritating to see Patrick so blatantly ignore what SpongeBob is trying to say. He just destroys the card over time. Patrick only showed us one card. He just so happened to have the other 4 in that one pack. I was kind of calling this ending, but didn't think they'd actually go with it. But hey, at least it was resolved quite nicely. 18. Spongeicus. Plankton destroys his restaurant and brings in a call.
At the end of it, Patrick is like, "Oh, SpongeBob, can I see one of your cards? I lost my house key again." Or I locked my house, whatever he said again. No one's experience shared. Okay, let me see. Ooh, this is another good one.
See him, but nobody's interested until he says it's free to come in, taking away Krabs' customers. And Plankton actually delivers. He throws out a sea lion that chases Patrick around the stadium.
Let's see. Try the grass one.
SpongeBob comes in to save the day. So while he's doing that, nothing really happens, and everyone is forced to eat chum for 10 bucks a piece. Ethics not being considered, this is a really good way that money is up. All he needed to do was serve some decent food, and he'd have some solid competition against the rest of the crab. The sausages that are around Patrick's neck end up on top of Plankton. The episode ends with Krabs charging $10 for a Krabby Patty by threatening his customers with a lion. I guess that's one way to end this episode. Spongeicus isn't the funniest, but I still found it to be fairly entertaining. 17. Forest Pockets. SpongeBob and Patrick find a shrinking clam that's choking on its own pearl, but they think it's a volleyball. A jewel guy comes to them and buys it for truckloads of money. Literally.
Another good episode.
So they spend some of it on a lifetime supply of strawberry gum and continue to spend money on ice cream. And that's when SpongeBob ends up inviting some guys that can afford it. And this somehow leads to SpongeBob building a massive mansion with his wealth. That is saying how much I hate rich SpongeBob's look. He reeks of a creep with his flickering lips and mustache. Ugh. But can we just bring up that Patrick, for some reason, doesn't have half the fortune, so he's forgotten about entirely. Not that it matters anyway, since SpongeBob wastes all his money by giving it to other people. At least he admits he was wrong. But yeah, that's basically the whole thing. It's not too shabby an episode. 16. Gold Nails. Krabs has nails apparently. He wants to get a manicure, but doesn't want to. So he puts SpongeBob in charge while he's gone, and he takes it very seriously. And that's when Squidward decides to take advantage of him and tell him a bunch of lies. He ends up doing all sorts of ridiculous things, which is getting a good chuckle out of me. It does start to lean on to the nastier side, with Squidward telling SpongeBob to basically dump trash everywhere. For season 6, this is one of the better ones. 15. Grand Pappy Pirate. Krabs gets a letter from his...
Another really good one. I've seen this one several times.
Ship. However, he no longer has a ship since he wasn't making money as a pirate, so they decide to make the Krusty Krab look like one. The montage of them making the ship is pretty goofy as well. So as Grandpappy arrives, how the hell is he still alive? He was in his 50s or 60s when Krabs was a baby. Wouldn't he be well into the hundreds by now? They pretend to sail with Squidward making the waves, and Patrick spitting water in Grandpappy's face. After fooling him for a while, Earl arrives and everything just kind of falls apart. Once Grandpappy sees the
literally and metaphorically.
So he's so proud of him. It's a very charming story, and it's told pretty well. 14. Sandcastle in the Sand. Here we go again with the characters ripping their skin off. You would have gotten used to this by now, but I still haven't. It doesn't get much better with SpongeBob acting as obnoxiously as he possibly can with squishing people on the bus and poking everyone around him. You know what I hate about this season? I feel like I can't trust SpongeBob or Patrick at all. If you're gonna be a nuisance, there needs to be a good reason behind it.
Absolutely. When I place it higher, some a lot of others he's put on this list, no.
Awesome. SpongeBob annoys Squidward right from the get-go, so he tells him to act more. I don't think my sponge is all a solution. Squidward is saying he doesn't, but sure, we'll go along with it. So SpongeBob learns to be normal. He proceeds to act away for most of the episode. He's making Krabby Patty cleaner, and Sponge's I can't believe how much was crammed into just the action segments. As for the cartoon, there's not really much of an interesting story in it, but the reason to watch this at all is for all the cameos and visual variety. I mean, there are so many flashbacks that it's hard to keep track of. But anyway, Karen expects the state to be a great one to steal the formula since Krabs been so distracted with the nursery. Meanwhile, SpongeBob decorates the place, and while they try to get an ice patty out of the freezer, they lock themselves inside.
Do I need to pause this? Freaking heck. Yeah, these water and poison. I just realized that commentary turned down, so you guys haven't been able to hear. Damn it.
It's the big one. I don't even know where to begin, because so much happened in this double episode. For once, it doesn't feel like it's loaded with filler, but genuinely solid content and good pacing too. Things start off with the Krusty Krab being really hot because Mr. Krabs doesn't pay the bills. He owes $9 million, so honestly, I don't blame him. So they go out to the Goo Lagoon and serve Krabby Patties on a surfboard. The only weird part about this episode is everyone acts like they don't know each other at first. Mr. Krabs introduces himself, SpongeBob doesn't recognize Sandy's voice. The writers must have assumed this double feature was going to be catered to a wider audience. As you can guess, serving food on a surfboard doesn't forebode well, and everyone gets lost in a big wave. Mr. Krabs is stuck in the Dutchman's Triangle, and the others on an island, although Sandy's on her own. This leads us bouncing back and forth between 3 different subplots, which is another trend that started to become more common in the 2010s.
And it was occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally that was a thing that was the case with Friendship with Magic episodes.
And it actually works well here. Each character is going through different struggles, but are all trying to get back to the Bikini Bottom. Mr. Krabs goes crazy when in his cash register, until the Dutchman gets in the way and drops his groceries. Sponge, Patrick, and Squidward fail at learning how to surf, so they're sent down a river to meet Gale. This character is a buff-as-hell surfer guy that's voiced by Johnny Depp. No wonder this is a double feature. Gale teaches them how to surf and get back home. Good timing, considering the big one is about to arrive, which is the perfect way to get back. Sandy manages to build civilization in the helicopter to get back, but gets hit by Mr. Krabs' cash register and crashes to the bottom. By the end, everyone gets back safe and sound. It's a great way to end the episode. My favorite part is the Dutchman getting stuck in Davy Jones' locker by the real Davy Jones. Yeah, I had no idea who this guy was, so
Again, this is the frickin' best. Like, I 110% agree, this is definitely hands down the best part of the episode. He's like, that's right, baby, you're in my locker! Frickin' thing.
looked him up, and apparently he was an actor and singer for decades. episodes, but man, what a crazy fun episode this was. 2. The Krabby Chronicle. Well damn, this one really came out of nowhere.
The Krabby Chronicle, this is the one episode when I first seen the Ponyville Confidential episode of Friendship is Magic. I wonder to myself, we'll have to honestly wonder if this is inspired by the frickin' that SpongeBob episode, because they're very, like, pretty much same concept. It's all, hey, someone's having to frickin' write under an identity, like a persona, a fake persona / identity of a character, person, whatever, that doesn't exist, and both are frickin' being forced beyond against their will to write and / come up with things that are either or to be used for bullcrap stories. In this episode, Mr. Krabs making SpongeBob come up with stuff so he can lie about people, and then the Friendship is Magic episode, Diamond TR are freaking using their stuff and spreading bullcrap about different characters throughout Ponyville. They're all the thing. And the interesting thing about Devil Interview Mr. Krabs and Diamond TR is Mr. Krabs is money heavy and is rich off of Mr. Krabs stuff, and Diamond TR was born into a direct wealthy family because of her parents being filthy rich and spoiled rich. Oh, wrong remote. Anyway. And also, the end of both episodes, the Friendship is Magic and SpongeBob episodes, especially, both characters get what they deserve. Diamond TR gets what she deserves, and has her frickin' her position as the editor of the Ponyville Confidential, or whatever the heck their Philly school's freaking newspaper is called. She gets that stripped away from her, and Mr. Krabs ends up losing his paper because people don't want it anymore, because SpongeBob puts out that Mr. Krabs was freaking telling lies about people, so the characters come and spread their money back, but it still ends up being a happy ending for Mr. Krabs, because he ends up learning how to freaking print counterfeit money. And he himself probably doesn't have any idea that it's actually counterfeit fake money he's making.
Mr. Krabs buys the world's smallest ad in a newspaper to bring in customers. He puts his ad in a paper that isn't read by anyone, so he makes his own printing press and has SpongeBob in charge of his press. He's not the best at the job, as he reports on Patrick watching a bowl very carefully. So Mr. Krabs tells him to lie instead. Boy, has this episode aged like fine wine, taking things out of context in an attempt to ruin someone's life for their own game.
Never even thought anything of that until hearing him say that, when it comes to how people love to do that crap, and like it's prevalent like throughout the world, because it's just the negative part of the double-edged sword of technology and the internet. But it's very prevalent on social media, particularly YouTube and Twitter.
Wow, imagine that! After SpongeBob saddens tons of people, he ends up writing a story about Mr. Krabs himself. This was incredibly satisfying to see happen. Mr. Krabs even loses all his money in the end, but that's not how this one ends. I guess the writers didn't really know what to do here. Mr. Krabs starts printing his own money, and Patrick shows up with a mop, dresses the pole. Oh, wait, okay, I get it. That joke took me a minute. This episode came out right when social media was starting to take off, and it's amazing how well it's encapsulated the news cycle in today's age. Just lie a little bit to get people's attention, and whatever happens to them if you're able to bring in the clout and big bucks. 1. Krabby Road. This episode really brings the question, how is this the...
Another really good episode. I forgot about... Well, yeah, I forgot it was this one because it's been so long since I've seen it.
First time Plankton ends up in jail after trying to steal the formula. It took 6 seasons for this to happen, which is kind of wild. But anyway, Plankton escapes jail and not even Karen lets him back into the jump bucket. With his stuff is his guitar. That's when SpongeBob notices and decides to join Plankton's band. Patrick is
kind of funny and ironic though that Karen calls him a deadbeat and kicks him out when she... yeah, but he's your deadbeat. All of a sudden you're kicking him out. I have the mind to freaking come in there and smash you to all the pieces with the freaking hammer, you stupid frickin' Karen.
End of 22. After a week, they perform at the Krusty Krab after hours. Plankton is caught and sent back to jail. My goodness, was this a hilarious episode. It really felt like one of the classic ones. Patrick playing the drums on his belly, his amazing hairdo, and Squidward getting absolutely shredded. I mean, damn, that's impressive for one day of work. There's just so many funny moments. I love that Squidward was so against joining the band until he started listing up all the things that could happen and pulled a complete 180 within like 10 seconds.
I need to go to the fire, right? I'm gonna buy a bunch more Moo Moo Milks.
You know, I didn't have to do this, but I'm in too deep. I might as well finish the rest of these episodes because, wow, Season 6 was a lot rougher than I remember it being. I mean, the characters are just so mean to each other. Everyone's such a jerk. There's barely any good episodes at all. There was a few decent ones, but the majority of them were either mediocre, bad, or just awful. And there's more to go. I'm not even halfway through. We're only getting to Season 7. 50. A pal for Gary. While SpongeBob is at work, Gary takes some food and watches TV all day. But SpongeBob thinks Gary feels lonely, so he buys another pet to keep him company. Puppy Fluffy is not the kindest creature in the world. In fact, he hates Gary right off the bat. SpongeBob, being oblivious as always, doesn't notice how violent Puppy Fluffy is and gets legitimately mad at Gary. As if this is his fault at all, the poor snail is chased around all night while Puffy destroys the house. But damn if Gary didn't try to fight it off, even if he didn't stand much of a chance. How can SpongeBob possibly think that Gary destroyed the house? Would he even be physically capable of doing that? But then, when
Interesting usage and decision to use the Conway Desert music from Market Deluxe.
Puff finally sees what Puffy is like, he thinks Gary is in the wrong still. What is wrong with you? Gary, being the Chad he is, chased out Puppy Fluffy himself at least. But wow, this just might be the worst SpongeBob episode I've ever seen. It wasn't funny at all, and SpongeBob was blaming Gary for everything that went wrong. Just, what a shame this show has become. 49, stuck in the ringer. SpongeBob is showering and uses a ringer to dry off. However, he slips on soap and gets stuck in his ringer. Then Patrick comes along and puts Forever Glue on the ringer. The amount of times I have sighed watching these newer episodes is unfathomable. Why do I have to watch this starfish be such a dunce? Anyway, SpongeBob goes to work and he's taking a much longer time making patties and makes a mess. He gets kicked out as you'd expect, and all Patrick does is make SpongeBob feel worse and worse. They get into a fight, and now everyone hates SpongeBob? He didn't do anything wrong. The next day, Patrick comes back to see SpongeBob in a deep mental trance, until they realize that tears dissolve the glue, and they both end up in the ringer together. I remember watching this a long time ago and hating it, and it's not quite as bad as my memory serves. It's still pretty messed up to see everyone be such mean to SpongeBob for something he can't even control. There was nothing funny about any of this. It just felt like more of a waste than anything. 48, The Play's the Thing. I like how the mailman is delivering mail to Squidward not at his house, but at the Krusty Krab.
Ouch.
SpongeBob blows up some condoms to imitate Squidward, and the letter is saying that his play won't be performed. But lucky for Squid, he's able to enact his play at the Krusty Krab. But he still has to abide by his job, so as he performs his play, he's also refilling drinks and serving food.
Interesting decision to use the X and Y bike music. It's been so long since I heard the X and Y, Pokemon X and Y bike music, I forgot how much I liked it.
Squid is able to enact his play at the Krusty Krab, but he still has to abide by his job. So as
Damn, the frickin' Pokemon X and Y bike music slaps. Holy crap.
he performs his play, he's also refilling drinks and serving food. SpongeBob gets distracted by his acting and burns the patties, which are then thrown at the both of them. This is just awful. This is very much like Squirrel jokes, but cruel for virtually no reason. Mr. Krabs rakes in money for selling burnt patties, while Squidward and SpongeBob completely lose their minds. What a massive shit show. 47, one-course meal. Plankton casually blows up the ceiling for the Krusty Krab, and this cues a shockingly great action scene with SpongeBob firing peas and Plankton gliding around. Plankton traps them and convinces SpongeBob to reveal where the formula is, but Pearl shows up and he's terrified of her. In fact, he gets very paranoid about Pearl, but it's actually Mr. Krabs dressed up as her. This is a case of Krabs going too far. Plankton literally contemplates suicide. Like, I can't believe it really got to that point. That really killed the entire vibe of this episode. After that, Plankton scares Krabs with a vibe, and SpongeBob projects some pink whales to scare Plankton off. It's just everyone being mean to each other. Again. 46. Yours, mine, and mine. Patrick shares a Krabby Patty with SpongeBob, but eats the whole thing. He goes on to complain about the meal not coming with the toy, so Krabs makes him one with another Krabby Patty. Patrick hogs the toy all day and doesn't want to share it with SpongeBob. So what do? They fight over Patty Pal for half the episode until they roll to the Krusty Krab. Patrick eats it, so Mr. Krabs gives them one each. Outside of Patrick's music kicking, this episode is a waste. Watching them fight over Patty Pal gets real quick. 45, Tentacle Vision. Squid is watching Fab and Fancy in the middle of the night, and his favorite show is canceled. So he starts his own, called Squidward Chat.
Well, I do like this episode at the same time. Yeah, I can agree with it being so down so low.
Yep, he literally just called public access and got a show just like that. However, the show is filmed at Squidward's house with no crew. That doesn't make much sense until you realize it's so SpongeBob and Patrick have an opportunity to be annoying little twits. Because what other direction could this plot have gone? That's the point where everyone in the bottom shows up, and it somehow ends up as the #1 show. But Squidward is kicked out. The show continues on in his house. There's definitely some amusing moments here and there, but I'm getting really bored of Squidward getting harassed. This is like the only thing that happens to Squidward nowadays. 44, Big Sister Sam. Patrick's sister Sam is visiting, and she's somehow even more obnoxious than Patrick on his bad days. She talks like a caveman and is super aggressive for no reason. At this point, I've seen 49 of the 50 Season 7 episodes, and it sucks to be ending on such a bad note. Patrick and Sam decide to redecorate, and she starts taking things like Squidward's window. And it gets to a point where Squidward's house is destroyed, and this man is fed up with the bullshit. He's taking a stand with a bulldozer, but Sam throws the frickin' thing, and now SpongeBob's house is wrecked. Patrick doesn't want to admit that Sam is a problem, though, but she ends up leaving anyway because she's late for a manicure. God, this episode was awful. I don't want to meet any more of Patrick's family. 43, someone's in the kitchen with Sandy. Sandy eats a patty that Plankton was attached to, and he ends up trapped inside her suit and passes out due to a lack of water. But when Sandy goes home and showers, Plankton wakes up and steals her fur and tries to pretend he's Sandy in front of SpongeBob. Meanwhile, Sandy is going around town looking for her fur, and she gets made fun of until she finds Plankton. When she gets her fur back, she goes to jail for public nudity and trapped Plankton in a mustard jar. Sandy was never even nude, she always had a bra and panties on the whole time, but okay, I guess stomp on her some more because plot. I actually like the idea of this episode, it's just not done well. Everyone is once again stupid for the sake of moving things forward. Larry doesn't at all notice that Sandy isn't in her suit, doesn't have eyes, and sounds completely different. 42, the scent of money. Mr. Krabs is the kind of guy to hang out in a free parking lot just because it's free. He discovers that Gary can spot money when it's nearby, so he comes to the Krusty Krab to find loose change. Although this process makes Gary uncomfortable, he starts taking change from customers' purses and even downtown. Dude, you're just robbing people and making Gary feel awful. And SpongeBob has no empathy for his suffering snail. Boy, do I love that I expect our main character to act like this now. Wow, what an awesome character. SpongeBob does figure it out by the end, though. Mr. Krabs ends up in the hospital due to all the arcade's coins. It turns out Gary swallowed a magnet the whole time. I was thinking of like that. I just felt bad for Gary the whole time. But I'll start really saying, The only joke that was okay was Crab parking in the free parking lot, and that's about it. 41, that sinking feeling. Oh, would you look at the time, it's been about 10 minutes since Squidward got harassed. Yes, it's time for another episode where Sponge and Patrick choose to be great men. He's tired of them running across his yard, so he draws a line showing them the boundaries, and they don't think of going to the backside to meet up again. Their idea is to dig a tunnel instead. They play underneath Squid's house. Squidward still hears them, and after stomping in anger, his house falls into the tunnels that they built. This leads to the entirety of the bottom going underground. At least everyone gets punished instead of just Squidward. This one kind of dragged on. Not much happens, and the pacing was kind of slow. 40. Hide, and then what happens? Right away, Patrick doesn't remember SpongeBob's name. Just, why? Why does his speed levels keep changing so frequently? Anyway, he forgets how hide and seek works, so SpongeBob tries to explain it to him. Patrick forgets he's hiding, so he just goes home, and SpongeBob spends the rest of the episode looking for him. That's literally like 70% of the runtime. Sandy lends him some sort of pod to look some more, and he takes so long that it runs out of gas. He finds Patrick Ghost Star, which is a somewhat interesting aspect of this episode. It's very overdrawn and boring to watch. 39. Bottom Goof.
Okay, this is a really good episode.
It's in a super chipper mood. Just look at those dance moves. But a piece of gum ruins his day. A cop thinks he threw it on the ground, so he
Oh, not the episode I thought it was. Never mind. It's alright, but the copfish is an absolute a-hole.
Service. This cop is the entire joke of the episode. He constantly shows up to give Squidward tickets, and for some reason the gag doesn't get old. Even Squilliam shows up with a statue for cleaning all the bottom in a week. So Squidward tries to keep this in a name. With SpongeBob's help, he moves the trash everywhere until he makes a Squidward statue. And this somehow melts the Squilliam one because it smelled bad. This episode is so dumb. The cop kind of holds it together like Elmer's glue. 38. Don't know Sponge. Sponge and Patrick quiz each other to see how well they know each other. This goes on for half the episode. The pacing is just awful. It turns out Patrick doesn't know anything about SpongeBob, or he's just a bad test tube. So SpongeBob starts to question if he really is his best friend, and ends up crying about it. Even Sandy calls this out, calling him a crybaby. The show is self-aware of the crying, and it doesn't care if it's annoying or not. Wow. So SpongeBob starts spying on Patrick and notices he's hanging out with Larry. Envious, he confronts him, and it turns out Patrick was buying him a present. You know, if they've been friends for so long, SpongeBob should know just how dumb Patrick really is. Maybe he isn't the real friend. 37. The inside job. Karen gets on Plankton's back about the chum bucket flopping. So her idea is to talk to Krabs while using a mind connector to make a formula. He's launching into SpongeBob's mind by accident and gets rid of SpongeBob's eyesight temporarily, accomplishing nothing. So he goes inside SpongeBob's mind, which is a replica of his house for some reason. I gotta admit, it's a cool idea as he goes into SpongeBob's library and finds the secret recipe in the heart. And this turns him into a little spongy plankton. This just got real wild out of nowhere. Karen sends him back when he gets attached to Patrick as well, and he comes back an idiot. I kind of feel like an idiot after watching this episode because I don't get it, but at least it had some really intriguing scenes. 36. The main drain. SpongeBob's grill is super dirty. When that's clean and washed up, he discovers the sink is full. Mr. Krabs doesn't want him pulling the drain plug, so he tells some story about a plug out in the open draining the entire ocean. Now I'm sure you're dying to know, why does Mr. Krabs care about this? Well, he and Plankton were the ones to pull this plug back in the day, but they didn't tell Sponge or Patrick until finding it on their own. But I'm sure you can predict that Patrick pulled the drain by accident. But still, that doesn't really explain why SpongeBob couldn't pull the sink drain earlier. But yeah, that's the episode. It's just okay. 35. Summer job. Mrs. Puff crashes into the Krusty Krab because of SpongeBob's note. Or SpongeBob being nuts. To pay for what she's done, she has to work at the Krusty Krab as a cashier. SpongeBob teaches her what to do in the most aggravating way possible. Forces her to take notes, he's super picky about how she does stuff. He sounds just like a fast food manager. After rolling on a barrel, she gets infuriated and goes back to her car, only to rip up SpongeBob's note and dump it on the ground, which a cop spots, so she's sent to jail and has to go to traffic school for it. And lucky Mrs.
Come on, stupid damn RNG having high jump kick missing times like this.
She goes back to her car, only to rip up SpongeBob's note and dump it on the ground, which a cop spots, so she's sent to jail and has to go to traffic school for it. And lucky Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob is the teacher for that summer. That's what the note said. Ah, yeah. look, if I wanted to watch Mrs. Puff be tortured for 11 minutes, there's way better episodes to pick from than this. 34, Tunnel of Glove. We found a rare specimen. A Glove World episode. Pearl is there this time with her friends, and they make a joke about how SpongeBob and Pearl are dating. Embarrassed, she goes on a ride with her friends, but is forced to meet SpongeBob. He drives Pearl insane when he's babbling, so she throws him on the ceiling, and a heart stops the engine. Now that they're trapped inside, it's time for Patrick to be a moron and save the day. He rips out the electricity, sits on a switch, and increases the water pressure to make the ride way scarier and more intense. This episode was alright. It kind of reminds me of the prom night one from season 1, but without any details. 33, Back to the Past. It's kind of like SB-129, but way more confusing. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy run out of gas, so SpongeBob and Patrick push the boat back to their house. As a thank you, they get a tour of all the old memorabilia from the shows. They say not to touch anything, but Patrick starts up the time machine. They go back in time when Bikini Bottom was older. They're at a point in time...
I love this episode so much, it is so good.
...where the heroes' younger selves are taking on Man Ray, and as they're about to meet him, Patrick eats the tartar sauce right when they need it. Patrick, you stop being yourself. They leave the heroes in the past, while Sponge and Patrick come back to Man Ray ruling the world. After finding the heroes cooking at a Man Ray version of the Krusty Krab, they go back in time over and over until Man Ray is finally captured. But since this is time travel, SpongeBob and Patrick keep revisiting this moment over and over again, and now my brain hurts. This episode is fine, but it's kind of exhausting to watch.
For me, I love it.
32, Shellback Shenanigans. Mr. Krabs calls Squidward a pet. Drop the f***ing mic, that diss went hard. Anyway, it's Bring Your Pet to Work Day, and SpongeBob is bringing Gary tomorrow. We all know how stubborn Care Bear is, and doesn't want to get cleaned up for the occasion. That's when Plankton drops in and convinces Gary to go on a trip instead. So Plankton takes Gary's place, and doesn't get anywhere with his plan. He gets clean... and doesn't want to get cleaned up for the occasion. That's when Plankton drops in and convinces Gary to go on a trip instead. So Plankton takes Gary's place, and doesn't get anywhere with his plan. He gets cleaned, sent to the hospital because he's talking, by the end beaten up by Gary. It's really funny that Gary becomes a bouncer, but otherwise it's just another Plankton fails plot. 31, Grandma's Secret Recipe. Plankton is visiting his grandma. You might think it's a wholesome little visit. Instead, he's keeping her teeth in the air as a disguise and goes to SpongeBob's house. After looking at old pictures, they eventually get to the Krusty Krab. Plankton sets up a decoy while he snoops around, but it ends up in the sink and SpongeBob shreds it to pieces. Plankton rests in Mr. Krabs' sink, but his grandma randomly shows up and gets her stuff back. It was neat to see more of Plankton's relatives, but otherwise it was forgettable. 30, A Day Without Tears. SpongeBob cries about anything that might go wrong. It gets extremely annoying. Not just for this episode, but just in general for a lot of these newer episodes. So Squidward makes a bet with him to not cry for the rest of the day. He keeps tempting him, but it's not working. Right at midnight when SpongeBob wins, he explodes with tears flooding the Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob's crying can go on for too long most of the time, but at least this episode makes a decent story out of it. And there's something really adorable about watching Squidward hang out with SpongeBob, even if it's just to make him cry. It reminds me of something two little siblings would do. 29, The Curse of Bikini Bottom. Well, this is one of the weirder ones. Squidward has a shed now. Hey, SpongeBob and Patrick find his lawnmower. Squidward lets them use it, hoping he'll get hurt, but instead they run into the cemetery and mess up the Flying Dutchman's shirt and beard for his date. So I guess canonically, this is where he lives. I don't know if we've ever seen that until now. Anyway, because his date is ruined, the Dutchman turns Sponge and Patrick into a ghost until his beard grows back. After a day of being ghosts, they want to be transformed back. It helped Dutchman go on his date by SpongeBob beating his beard. But then there's the ending, and sure was an ending.
Ion. Electrify. Hung tire.
The Dutchman is running away from his girlfriend because she wants to get married. He's got the world's tiniest pawn. I just feel very odd after watching this one. It's so weird, and none of the rules they set up were consistent throughout the entire episode. I gotta say though, SpongeBob breaking a spatula to turn it into a ghost spatula was hysterical. 28, Krusty Dogs. SpongeBob is shaping out patties and decides to cook one like a hot dog wiener. The customers are interested, so now they're a new item on the menu. In fact, Krabs just removes Krabby Patties entirely. Now, I'm the first to admit that Krabs can have smart business sense, but I don't understand this move at all. He's even got Squidward dressing up as the stupid hot dog. SpongeBob is pretty upset, so he's going out of his way to tell the customers that what they're eating is horseshit. That strangely doesn't work very well, so SpongeBob instead makes a hot dog explode and everyone runs out of the restaurant. It's rare to see SpongeBob retaliate anything that Mr. Krabs does, and he even teams up with Squidward. It's a pretty decent episode simply because the outcome is more unique than usual. 27. New fish in town. Patrick is renting out his front yard for a little extra moolah, and Howard decides to stay there. Squid is pretty excited since they have the same hobbies, but Howard isn't a fan of jellyfishers or bubble blowers. They play some music, but Sponge and Patrick keep giggling outside.
I might have seen this once. I don't remember.
No matter how much Squidward tries to hide it, he can't stop the noise, so Howard goes out to confront them, only to decide that he should loosen up a bit. Rips Squidward's hopes and dreams, but good for Howard for choosing to open up. This is more lighthearted than usual when it comes to Squidward being irritated. 26. Sponge Kano. SpongeBob sings through this garbage because of gratitude. Bit of a strange start, but okay, sure. Squidward breaks his pipe and yells at SpongeBob like usual, but he tightens his pipe a little too tight. He's really not in a good mood today. It's even worse than usual. Squidward is feisty with all the customers, getting mad at them over the most minute things, but suddenly, a volcano erupts and everyone takes shelter. Everything seems doomed, until a dolphin flying on a pole comes to save the day. This is somehow the weirdest looking SpongeBob character to me. But basically, a sacrifice has to be made to stop the volcano, and they must be the most miserable person in town. Guess who that is? Squidward is about to fall into the volcano, but SpongeBob saves him at the last second. That leap in Squidward's house launches it into the air, and it stops the volcano. Ah, yes, it's actually the most miserable person's house that stops the eruptions. Damn, this episode went all over the place. I'd be kinda down to see a double feature that's volcano themed. It was fairly interesting to watch. Like a lot of Season 7, I didn't laugh at all, but at least it contained a decent plot. 25. The Wreck of Mauna Loa. Sponge and Patrick are playing tag, and they end up finding a lost pirate ship.
I love this episode.
SpongeBob is at work, he keeps thinking about his secret ship. And once he leaves with Patrick, they pay with a Mauna Loa coin, which freaks Krabs out. Krabs follows up to the ship, only to discover that it's just a lost amusement park ride, which gives him the idea of bringing it back to life. Although Sponge and Patrick find the whole thing a secret, the ride ends up breaking down and Krabs gets arrested. Wow, that serves him right. It's about time that happens for the shenanigans he's been pulling the past couple seasons. But at the very end, SpongeBob and Patrick find the real Mauna Loa. So, good for them, I suppose. It's not too bad of an episode. I'm just glad Mr. K got all his company. 24. Karate Star. Oh wow, a karate-themed episode? It's been a long time since we've had one of these. And it starts off well with Patrick punching SpongeBob to get a fly out of him. And Patrick moving his fist into some cheese. After watching SpongeBob chopping bread, Pat wants to learn karate too. I really like how Patrick has his own colored gear. They made sure to not make it green, since that's what Sandy goes with. After a couple of moves,
Nice attention to detail, like it's a Smash Bros. All or something.
He's really damn good at karate. In fact, maybe too good. He gets really cocky and starts causing trouble with Krusty Krab and around town, but then he loses control of his company, so the only thing he can do is rip his arm off and it runs away. So I guess it really was a lie. But in the end, that ripped-off arm turns into another body. Because starfish grow that way. While not my favorite karate episode, it was a breath of fresh air after 100 Krusty Krab ones in a row. 23. Rodeos. SpongeBob jump scare. Him and Patrick have a staring contest and get a letter from Sandy. It's from her brother Ring, and it's about some rodeo that she's invited to. She starts singing a song about the rodeo, and it's pretty catchy. I especially love this cow. When she leaves, SpongeBob is concerned about her because of a clown, so he asks around and nobody wants to help him. He even asks Plankton. I don't know why this made me cackle, but this shot stayed static for so long it just casually exploded. So SpongeBob kidnaps everyone because Super Bubbles and this motherfucker actually makes it to Texas.
Let's see.
The bubble pops to the rodeo, and if this isn't the most surreal episode I've seen in a while. While I really liked the ending, the rest of it was just okay and a little boring. 22. The abrasive side. SpongeBob has learned a lesson from Plankton about being assertive. He slept at the bus stop to be first in line for Glove World, only to let a bunch of people in front of him. He ended up late because of Sandy's experiment, which forced SpongeBob to run on a mouse wheel to blend his smoothie. Why couldn't he keeps letting himself get pushed around by other people and doesn't end up going to a mold at all. So Gary's solution is to order in Abrasive, which is basically an evil version of SpongeBob. I love that he looks like a real abrasive sponge. That's a really clever use of that. This abrasive side doesn't just say no though, it's also extremely rude. At first, I really didn't mind because all his friends were taking hell advantage of him, but it went too far, so Sandy ripped it off. It doesn't seem like SpongeBob really learned how to say no the right way, but hey, it was a decent episode regardless. 21. The Curse of the Hex. There's a storm in Bikini Bottom, and some eel lady wants food. She doesn't have enough money, but SpongeBob sneaks out some patties after feeling bad for her, only to get caught. So this old lady curses the Krusty Krab. Oh boy. There's no customers showing up, and all of Mr. Krabs' money catches on fire. Realizing the curse is real, they find her and beg to lift the curse. It cracks me up how she said, I like men eggs, so hey, I guess she's a dom. But basically, this eel, Madame Hagfish, asks for a golden rupee from an eel, and after going out and getting it, she lifts the curse by removing the close sign. That is so silly. This entire episode is silly. It's one of the more memorable ones, with a few decent jokes thrown in. 20. Earworm. SpongeBob keeps singing at work and is addicted to the musical Doodle. So he buys the vinyl and listens to it all night. This was basically me in Lincoln Park when I was 15 years old. He's so addicted to the song that it's affecting his work. He's messing up orders and spilling drinks on people. Krabs tells him to stop, and to prevent any outbursts, SpongeBob destroys his kitchen and writes Doodle everywhere. I love how this just turned into a psychological horror film out of nowhere. They find out that he has an earworm, which forces him to be obsessed with the song. Squidward plays the song so bad that it drives the earworm away, and by the end, that goes into his skull instead. Once again, not really a funny episode, but it's got a fairly compelling plot that we can all relate to some extent. 19. The Masterpiece. There's a new restaurant called the Sea Chicken Shack that's driving away Krabs customers. SpongeBob goes in to check it out, and the place is a dump, but the kids love the giant chicken statue. So Squidward has the statue of Mr. Krabs. He decides to make it very pointy and sharp and calls it Oppression. This is going up there with Cold and Rash and ask me. Since it's not suitable for kids to play on, Mr. Krabs gives himself gold and uses himself as the statue. Artists have to suffer to make it, and Mr. K is learning that the hard way. 18. Cracked Crabs. Krabs is nominated for being the cheapest crab, and SpongeBob is going with to the award ceremony. They even travel there by envelope. My favorite part is all the different crab designs. It's nice to see a bunch of variety when we normally only get Mr. Krabs. He's worried about the stiff competition, so he has SpongeBob make a testimony, and he does make Krabs look like a good guy.
But yeah, really good episode.
I don't know why Krabs had any confidence in SpongeBob to begin with when he didn't even know what exaggerate. After the show, SpongeBob and Krabs exaggerate by trying to steal the hotel room. They get caught and are applauded by the other Krabs, and that's how he wins the award. A predictable yet strangely touching story. 17. Squidward and Clarinet. Two key things to note about this episode. 1. Mr. Krabs actually murdered someone. And 2. SpongeBob knows how to use the fourth dimension. This is another Squidward auditions for music episode, but holy shit does it go places. Squidward wants a place to put his stuff at work, so Mr. Krabs digs out an old locker. He has to share this with SpongeBob, but he makes some adjustments. And when I say adjustments, I mean he somehow expands the size of the locker tenfold. And I can't begin to describe what the hell happens in there. Squidward's checking out where his clarinet was, he somehow ends up in Clarinet Land. And there's a bald eagle that gets sassy with Squidward. What kind of acid trip is this? He gets eaten, catches SpongeBob, and gets trapped in a tiny room. The viewers start taunting him. He's in a pinball machine. A giant Patrick picks him up, and it just keeps on going. Squidward is sucked into a vacuum. He chases.
Yeah, do I like this episode? Yes, but this is a total drug trip.
SpongeBob through space and finally gets back to reality. Was this all a dream? I can't even tell at this point. But he gets so mad at SpongeBob that he traps him in the locker and tosses him on a bus stop far, far away. God damn, man! At the audition, Squidward finds SpongeBob in his clarinet case. I really hate how irritating SpongeBob was about ignoring Squidward's simple request, but Jesus, this episode just went everywhere. It feels like the writing process was thinking of random locations and things to do, and then forcing them all to work together into it. 16. Greasy Buffoons. SpongeBob slips on some grease, only to discover the grease trap is dirty, so they dump it behind the chum bucket. Now, can we just take a second to talk about how SpongeBob is driving this massive truck so easily, but he can't get his regular boating license? Anyway, Plankton uses this newfound grease and sells it, so Krabs and Plankton keep trying to one-up each other. Now, we all know that too much grease is pretty nasty. So SpongeBob calls the health department and they're forced to get rid of it. As gross as this one is, I actually kind of like this episode. Seeing fair competition between Krabs and Plankton is really cool. It's just too bad it was about out-greasing one another. 15. Trench buildings. SpongeBob and Patrick are jellyfishing and fall into a dark trench with a bunch of hillbillies. They're forced to go through an initiation, which involves a music contest. So SpongeBob turns into a banjo.
Okay, I think this is one I have never seen before.
Out for a good while. This initiation takes a good amount of the episode. They have to sing, show off their jellyfishing, and it's enough to pass the test to get them some free novelty tea. The hillbilly fish are kinda awesome. They remind me a lot of Plankton's family from season 3, but a bit more fleshed out. Sponge and Patrick manage to escape, but are fallen back to the Krusty Krab. After eating some patties and Mr. Krabs gets hitched, it all settles itself out. I didn't think I was gonna like this episode, but the hillbilly characters played their roles pretty well and made for a unique time. 14. Bottle Sponge. I wasn't expecting the title to be so blatant. It sure was. SpongeBob overhears Krabs saying he has to let someone go. It's him. Krabs was talking about a scallop, but SpongeBob doesn't realize it. So after Patrick chokes down some drinkable sausage, he applies for a couple jobs without much luck. I love how SpongeBob makes a Krabby Patty out of money. Just the way he did it made me chuckle. But he ends up auditioning as a sponge model and gets it because he's the only one to apply. You know, this episode is a lot like As Seen on TV, only he actually gets another job instead of just imagining it. SpongeBob's role is cleaning a bathroom for a commercial, but when they ripped his pants off, I thought he signed up for an adult film by accident. SpongeBob doesn't like cleaning the dirty bathroom, so he goes back to the Krusty Krab. There were quite a few funny moments and gags. I also love how the Hank is just sitting on the toilet at the end. Can we make a character, please? 13. Hulk attack. Sponge and Patrick get run over by whelks that are also attacking the bottom. These whelks attack with the lobber. You know, the one from Cuphead. They're going around eating everyone. And after Mr. Krabs fails to sell them Krabby Patties, the big mama comes in. She's a little teeny bit pissed off. She eats Squidward in the entirety of the Krusty Krab. These things are aggressive. Not even Sandy's tree dome is safe. Everyone gets eaten. But inside the belly, Sandy discovers that they're really sick, so SpongeBob sucks up all the bacteria and cleans them up that way. Holy crap, this episode was intense. Absolutely nothing stood a chance against the Whelks. They were completely unstoppable. It was a fun watch. 12. Perfect chemistry. Sandy and SpongeBob make a nut teleporter machine, but it doesn't really work. Funny enough, Plankton also made a new machine that turns him into a gas cloud. I love the random broccoli just sitting there with a towel. We're off to a good start here.
Let's see.
He tries to get into Krab's safe, but is instead blown to Sandy's tree dome by some miracle. So in a bizarre twist, the ultimate collab of Sandy and Plankton work together to fix her nut teleporter. These are the kinds of things I want to see more of. Characters that normally never interact, doing so on a thoughtful scale. She brings her machine to the chum bucket so they combine them together. SpongeBob is the test monkey, and they're getting the machine to work quite right. Only parts of
Interesting usage of that frickin' Diddy Kong Racing, Donkey Kong 64 minecart ride music.
SpongeBob's body are teleporting, and they keep haunting Squidward, which was cracking me up. This is by far the best use of fart jokes I've seen in quite a while. Once the machine is figured out, Plankton uses it to get the formula, but instead he's trapped in the jar without it. This was a really good one to watch. I want to see more weird stuff like Squidward and Larry working out together, or something like that. 11. The Bad Guy Club for Villains. SpongeBob gets a tape with a lost episode of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. This one is about a bunch of villains beating up Bikini Bottom. But if you remember Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 5, Sponge and his friends were in costumes parodying Justice League. Well, this episode actually shows the real versions of those characters.
Which is freaking awesome.
Well, some of them are missing and there's one new guy, but it's still cool to see regardless. And then they fight it out for a little while. In the end, the bad guys were just getting together for a book club. It's so cute how the end of the lost episode has SpongeBob credits too. This is a short but sweet one. It's got a little bit of fan service and is overall a fun time. 10. Buried in Time. Mr. Krabs sets up a time capsule to be opened in 50 years, but Squidward thinks it's the most ridiculous thing and starts making fun of customers' items. Patrick tries to throw a rock into the capsule, but Squid doesn't want to allow it, and they manage to slip inside. Krabs even throws in the formula, and he just ignores that his employees and Patrick are right there.
Let's see,
While they're trapped underground, they start imagining what the future will be like. And Patrick imagines a normal-ass city, which was pretty funny. But while that's happening, Plankton digs a hole through the capsule and takes the formula. With that tiny hole, Squidward manages to squeeze through and dig his way out with his bare hands. Damn. But since it hasn't actually been 50 years, he goes back down. Okay, weirdo. He proceeds to step on Plankton, who at the end tries to poop it out. What a bizarre episode. It had a few jokes that had me giggling, so it's up there as one of the better ones in Season 7. 9. The Great Patty Caper. We got ourselves quite the juicy double special. Krabby Patties have run out, so Krabs and Sponge are trying to make them from scratch, but can't remember the recipe. So they actually do something really smart. Move the formula away from the restaurant. Finally, a solid plan. But they forgot to read what the formula is. Don't they just order their patties from some factory? I mean, I guess not, because they're going on a train to get the safe open, and Krabs gives SpongeBob the key. And as you may expect, SpongeBob loses it almost right away, so now he's got to find it. He calls out people he's met on the train, and they manage to bust some other thieves, but none of them have the key. And that's when Patrick pulls it out to clean his teeth. But Plankton is also on board and manages to take the key and kick them off. But SpongeBob runs off a cliff and turns into a goddamn plane fighter, and we got a badass release. It's not quite enough though, because Plankton traps them at the front of the train and removes the lock. This train just so happens to stop conveniently right in front of the main. I gotta say, this is Plankton's best plan yet. While he's getting the formula, Sponge and Patrick try to turn the train around, but it takes them quite a while as they smash into a rock and almost run into a rest home. Don't ask how they turn the train around, because I don't know either. Plankton gets the formula, and just like that, Krabs randomly shows up to stop him. SpongeBob's train helps when a door falls and lands on Plankton. Whew, a lot happened in this episode. This is gonna sound weird, but the whole thing reminds me of a Hat in Time's train mission where you have to look for a murderer. While a lot of this plot didn't make sense, I still had a good time watching The Great Patty Caper. 8. Growth Spout. Pearl is having a growth spout and gets very large and hungry. She threatens Mr. Krabs' money, so he goes around stealing everyone's food. And for once, it feels justified because it's the middle of the night and there are these stores open. The next day, she eats a Krabby Patty and Krusty Krab and gets full from that. This was a really fun one to watch. There's some pretty solid jokes, and the cops did a great job at being just as stupid as Patrick. Yeah, they're probably the only part of the episode I didn't care for, but it was fairly brief, and it's mostly great because Mr. Krabs is actually trying to take care of his daughter. 7. Gary in Love. SpongeBob and Gary go to a snail park and he falls in love with one of the snails. But the girl snail's boyfriend gets feisty about them hanging out and teeter-totter. So when SpongeBob's asleep, Gary goes out to find her. And this reminds me so much of high school. I left the house in the middle of the night a couple times myself to see friends or a girlfriend. Unfortunately for Gary, he ends up in a store as a stray snail. The bad guys are on the lookout for him. Gary eventually catapults his way to his crush. SpongeBob finds him, realizing why he left the house. Only for Gary and this tiny snail to get absolutely played. This is a really solid episode. Not too funny, but I really enjoyed the story. 6. Welcome to the Bikini Bottom Triangle. A bunch of objects and even Mr. Krabs were missing. Apparently they're in the Bikini...
This is the one I was thinking of previously. Such a good episode.
Bikini Bottom Triangle, which is just a massive island with trash on it. A vacuum cleaner sucks the sky and grabs whatever it can for this place. I really love this concept in general. Maybe this is what's behind black holes all along. They find that there's these mermaids that are causing all the problems, and they're just teenagers stealing people's things because they're bored. That is hilarious, and Patrick has a crush on them too. And he really does have a thing for mermaids, since he was also into Mindy from the first movie.
So
Pearl tells these mermaids about the ball, and they sing their song backwards, and everything returns to normal. I really like this episode. The characters felt genuine in this one. 5. Enchanted Tiki Dreams. SpongeBob and Patrick keep hurting themselves and making a lot of noise. When Squidward confronts them, he gets zapped by an eel, and his house falls apart on top of him. Squidward starts crying under his chair, just wanting some peace and quiet. And for once, Sponge and Patrick actually feel bad and decided to make some changes. So when Squidward goes outside again, he notices a tiki paradise in front of him. And man, Squid could not have been happier. Everything just looks so pristine and beautiful. Big props to SpongeBob and Patrick for putting all this together. They actually made a valiant effort here. And the Tiki song is super catchy as well. It's too bad that Patrick accidentally knocked over a tiki and everything burned down. But it looked like a vacation, so it didn't feel like it was supposed to last for forever anyway. The Squidward Redemption arc. This was a really nice piece. 4. The Monster Body. Patrick takes a rubber stopper out of a toxic barrel. This creates a massive monster. He is completely unfazed by this guy who's called Rar, and he become friends. For some reason, it's really funny watching Rar interact with Sponge and Patrick. They're just so passive about the whole thing, but he starts picking up.
Why, specifically in this fight, does frickin' High Jump keep missing? Stupid crap.
Called Rar, and they become friends. For some reason, it's really funny watching Rar interact with Sponge and Patrick. They're just so passive about the whole thing, but he starts picking up and destroying their houses because he thinks it's a fun game. So the cops try to put him around a fence, but all he wants to do is hang out. So Rar runs into town and starts reading a newspaper, but the cops force him to leave. Thankfully, there's still a way for him to hang out with Patrick. He serves ice cubes from a mountain to customers and the Krusty Krab. Look, I can't explain why I like this episode so much. Mark is just such a charming monster, and he's really fun to watch. 3. SpongeBob's Last Stand. We got ourselves another double feature, and it's a surprisingly good one. I need to point out that SpongeBob and Patrick keep wearing these stupid goggles with the jellyfish now, and I don't get why. It's like they're trying to drive the point home that they're nerdy professionals way too hard. But anyway, Jellyfish feels the danger of going away because of some highway that Plankton funded by the
This is a very good episode.
city. SpongeBob tried to change people's minds, but nobody listens to him, and the highway is built. And it happened to be built right over the Krusty Krab and into the jump bucket, driving Mr. Krabs to sell his formula to Plankton. But the jellyfish come back because they have nowhere else to go. And SpongeBob finally convinces everyone the highway is bad to have, and they get rid of it. This episode drives a strange parallel to our real world where climate change is happening, yet nothing is being done about it. People tend to only think about consequences until damage has already been done. That's pretty much what's happening here too. It was pretty heartbreaking to see Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and even Squidward torn apart about what was happening. It's not often you get to see these characters go through struggles and actually feel it with them. There weren't many jokes, but the plot was really good, and the song numbers were decent. 2. Love That Squid. Squidward has a big crush on a lady cephalopod that rolls into the Krusty Krab. He struggles to talk normally in front of her. Oh my god, that's so adorable! But SpongeBob, being the absolute Chad he is, talks him up a storm and secures him a date. Since it's been so long since Squid's last date, he goes on a practice one with SpongeBob instead. And honestly, SpongeBob is doing a pretty good job teaching Squidward what to do and how to act, but he's not doing the best with manners and etiquette. As soon as Squidward starts yelling at SpongeBob, it's very obvious what's gonna happen next. He yells and yells while his real mate is right behind him, but she loves all of it. He gets to spend actual time with her. One of the most satisfying episodes I've seen in a while, and it actually made me laugh. 1. I Heart Dancing. SpongeBob is dancing. Ooh, he's got some good moves. So good that a lady in the Krusty Krab wants him to audition as a backup dancer. Squidward finds out and decides to tire SpongeBob out so he can take over. And shockingly, his plan actually works and he gets the gig. The Squilliam Show! Oh, I did not see that twist coming. It got me good. This was a really great episode. The jokes were funny and it was fun watching SpongeBob jam out, especially with the ribbon. Like, man, that's some real talent right there. I just love SpongeBob's face when he said, "Put you on this planet." It just came off so sassy. Well, we just got through our longest season yet, and yeah, it is a lot like Season 6, where most of the episodes suck and there's only a few decent ones. And a weird thing that I noticed is a lot of these are based on the Krusty Krab, like that's just a very essential theme. We're always in the Krusty Krab, it seems like, and as we go further and further into SpongeBob, this doesn't get changed. This is just like the theme of the show. And yeah, I think with Season 7 over, it's time to move on to Season 8. This is a season I think I watched all the episodes like one time, but I don't remember any of it, so... oh boy. Here we go. 47 in Spongiac. Wow, what a detailed title card that is. Krabs complains that SpongeBob used 1% more mustard than he should have, and really gets on his case about it. Why do I feel like I'm watching Giggles mashed with procrastination? SpongeBob slept for 2 less minutes than usual, which apparently makes him an insomniac. So now Krabs is all paranoid and is being a micromanaging little bitch. As you can imagine, SpongeBob isn't able to get asleep now and is overthinking everything he does. Now, by far the strangest part of this whole episode is this shot of SpongeBob going to Patrick's rock. Can anyone tell me where Squidward's house is? It's just gone. Anyway, Patrick reads him a bedtime story, and that doesn't help at all. In fact, he gives SpongeBob some coffee and starts hallucinating. After getting almost no sleep, he goes to work, and after dipping in some mustard, starts frying mustard on the patties, and this is the correct amount? What an awful episode. There was nothing funny here. It's just Mr. Krabs being incredibly mean-spirited for no reason.
One of many episodes to come that I have never seen before.
46. Restraining SpongeBob. SpongeBob being annoying for 2 minutes, and then he hurts Squidward for another 2 minutes. After officially going insane, Squidward gets a restraining order. It is about damn time, honestly. Since Sponge and Squidward can't really work together, Patrick is hired to annoy Squidward. He annoys and harasses him so much that Squidward replaces SpongeBob with him on the restraining order. Why not just get 2 restraining orders instead? Whatever, this episode's pretty meh anyway. 45. Patrick's staycation. Patrick needs a nice break from his life. Waking up, eating, sleeping. Man, that sure sounds like a rough life he got there. Maybe we can trade for a bit? Anyway, SpongeBob suggests to him to take the staycation. I'm a big fan of the mustache hair that he rocks later on, but otherwise, this is off to a bad start. This is one of those Patrick extra dumb episodes. I mean, he's drowning in the freaking bathtub for crying out loud. If I wanted to watch a good Hotel SpongeBob episode, I'd watch Rusty Towers. Look, I get the joke of the episode, staycation is being treated like a normal vacation, but it's just not doing much. And I'm just not feeling the energy from the plot, with the pace and the line delivery. Patrick's getting a massage, and then Squidward gets one for 5 hours so SpongeBob goes to bed tired? What's happening? You know what? Just skip. I'm just skipping. 44. Another Patty. Krabby Patty's self-destruct 10 feet beyond the Krusty Krab. The thought of that is actually really terrifying. Plankton wants to steal a different patty recipe, this time from the Flabby Patty. But Krabs also wants it, so it's a competition. This is pretty much best frenemies from Season 4, except Krabs and Plankton are teaming up, which isn't as interesting. They keep messing up, but their mistakes don't even make sense. Plankton gets trampled on before sneaking in, and just gives up instead of, I don't know, going inside after that happened? Anyway, they work together to steal the formula, only for the owner to be SpongeBob. This is another predictable ending, so it makes waiting for the payoff not feel worth it. He literally wants them to be friends and suggests they steal together, so the whole thing is super obvious. 43. Drive-thru. Mr. Krabs creates drive-thru. This isn't the first time we've seen a Krusty Krab drive-thru, but this episode expands on the idea. Krabs makes his drive-thru by smashing a hole through the wall, menus written on napkins, and there's cans for the microphone. This creates absurdly long lines to the point where the cops are giving him tickets for turning the Bikini Bottom into a parking lot. So the solution is to put more holes in the walls. It doesn't really help, so with even more holes, the entire restaurant collapses on itself. This is a very strange episode. I don't hate the concept, but it's executed in such an odd manner. Plot points kind of jump all over the place. It doesn't feel well woven together. My favorite part was probably Plankton selling his chub nuggets while people waited in line, but that's about it. 42. Bubble Buddy returns. Holy crap, a sequel to one of the most iconic SpongeBob episodes. Bubble Buddy brings a letter to SpongeBob and asks SpongeBob to watch his son while he and his wife are out of town. This is what they're gonna go with? Immediately, his son Shiny is causing chaos. Now I get what they're trying to pull here. Shiny is super destructive like his dad was, but it doesn't work in this context because it was way more subtle back then, and SpongeBob was the problem, not the bubble. If SpongeBob would just stop letting Shiny go, please hold on to that damn bubble for dear life. When they get home after a million excursions, he pops him when he bops him with another bubble and tries to bring him back. Once he's returned, his dad arrives for 5 seconds and leaves. You know, for a Bubble Buddy episode, it barely featured actual Bubble Buddy at all. I'm a little disappointed this episode wasn't very good. 41. Face Freeze. Oh no. I remember this one and I was not a fan last time I watched it. SpongeBob and Patrick start making a bunch of faces, and Krabs gets upset and tells them to cut it out or their faces will freeze up. But they just can't help themselves and keep on doing it. I can imagine it must have taken a lot of effort to come up with all these faces as animators, but there's just not much substance in the episode itself, and there really aren't any jokes either. After they both hold a particular face for a long time, it actually freezes up. Wow, didn't see that coming. Sandy tries to fix them, and it doesn't really work. Sponge goes to work the next day, and let's just say that his roommates is giving him some serious problems. Mr. Krabs gets really mad when he finds out, and then he gets the face freeze. And so does Squidward for laughing at them all. Just, okay, what a story this sure was. It wasn't as creepy as I remember, but there's just not much here besides the faces. 40, Demolition News. It's time for another Boarding School episode.
That Faces episode might as well just been called freaking the Nightmare Fuel episode. Maybe Nightmare Faces is a play on Nightmare Fuel.
The only notable thing to mention are these sick grinds SpongeBob gets before going to class. Mrs. Puff gets so inflated that when she crashes, she can no longer puff up. I've seen this version of Mrs. Puff as memes in the past, and I kinda forgot that even existed until now. SpongeBob is once again a naive asshole, calling her Mrs. Pop, having no idea why she's upset. God, I hate watching these ones. He buys her flowers she's allergic to, forces her to leave the room. Please make this stop. For some reason, the hospital has a demolition derby, so Puff gets the idea of throwing SpongeBob into the mess to get rid of him forever. After signing him up, he's basically invincible to getting hurt. Even his car can't get destroyed. After he wins the demolition, Mrs. Puff gets a stab at it and ends up wrecking her boating school. I really don't have much to say. The demolition scenes were entertaining to some extent, but it's just kind of the same thing we've seen over and over again. 39. Accidents will happen. Squidward twists his ankle at work and tries to give the OWS a call to get some fines. I guarantee the fine is like $1 and I bet see what happens then. But Krabs says he'll give him anything he wants to avoid paying so he gets the day off. Krabs convinces SpongeBob to figure out what actually happened. So Patrick helps because of course he does, and Krabs ends up giving Squidward a foot massage with fragments. Nasty. The OWS guy comes anyway because SpongeBob calls. Yep, the fine literally was $1. This show is so confusing sometimes. But Squid was caught napping on the buttons and ends up massaging the pads. This reminds me a lot of the Dime episode from season 3, but way less interesting. This comes off as a really forgettable episode. Or maybe I've just watched too much SpongeBob at this point. 38, Squiditis. Squidward wants to go outside, so he pretends to be sick to skip work. He doesn't fool Mr. Krabs, but SpongeBob on the other hand, because it's Sponge so much, Squid gets the day off. But later on, Sponge thinks he's contracting Squid's disease as well, so he dips his feet. He says a cure. This makes me a little uncomfortable to watch, I'm not gonna lie. After being told to go home, Squidward doesn't get the time away from SpongeBob. Krabs tries to run the place on his own, but it's just too much. So after being forced to watch a romantic comedy with SpongeBob, Squidward runs back to work. This is another annoying episode. It's a lot more tame when it comes to harassing Squidward, but it's just not very fun to watch. Another super forgettable episode. 37. Sweet and Sour Squid. Squidward drives customers away playing the clarinet, and while he cries, Plankton schemes a plan to get the formula from him. He tries and tries and tries until SpongeBob suggests that he talk about music with him. This actually works. Squidward is enthralled to have a fan at all, and we get a fairly decent song number too. Even after befriending him, Squidward doesn't know the formula, so frustrated, he steals the clarinet. But since the music was so bad, he gets arrested for it. This is an alright episode. I'm really starting to get tired of Plankton failing to steal the formula plots though. I've seen an endless amount of them now. 36. Barnacle Face. In a weird turn of events, we get a good look at what Pearl's high school is actually like. Pearl has a barnacle on her face, so Krabs makes SpongeBob get rid of it, and let's just say it doesn't go over well. In fact, the problem just gets worse as the barnacles spread. Gonna take a wild guess that the soap isn't actually soap, and wow, I was right! They're made out of leftover Krabby Patties. Oh, that kind of makes sense. So SpongeBob takes Krabs' jewelry and fills her holes with it so she can go to a dance. Okay, that's almost more nasty. I'm not really a fan of this episode. Just take Pearl to the damn spa, Krabs, I mean, sheesh. 35. Walking the Plankton.
Let's see. Okay, good. I don't have to go throw around a frickin' Logam Tower or Pyrite.
Okay, that's some clever wordplay, I have to admit. Plankton isn't able to show his slides, so SpongeBob helps out. The story goes with Krabs and SpongeBob going on a free cruise, so Plankton and Karen go along to steal the formula. Although Karen doesn't know that's why they're actually going. While she's asleep, Plankton does his usual thing. There's not much interesting happening, but I am very amused by the free land food buffet. It's the same thing as usual. Plankton gets the Krabby Patty, but is stopped by Karen, which strangely has become more of a trend in these later seasons where she stops him. She's very against him nowadays. 34. Pet Sitter Pat. SpongeBob is invited to his grandma's house for her birthday, but nobody can watch Gary. Squidward is busy, so Patrick ends up watching him. I'm sure we're all reminded of I'm a Teenage Gary, but Patrick takes Squidward's spot. Although he does a slightly better job than Squidward did. Instead of neglecting him, he eats Gary's food right in front of him. As Patrick continues to neglect Gary, he kind of just gets used to it. Once the house is flooded, they're both having a lot of fun all of a sudden, despite SpongeBob being super paranoid about what's going on. When SpongeBob gets back, Gary is reading Patrick a story in bed. This one is really, really dumb, but it did make me laugh a couple times. 33. Smooth Jazz and Bikini Bottom. Squid be jamming out to some jazz from Kelpie G, and guess whose tickets ended up in Patrick's mouth? Luckily, 2 tickets are being given away and SpongeBob wins them. He's a nuisance for the duration of the concert, as you'd expect, but honestly, the music is so chill that I don't even mind that much. That is, until Patrick showed up ruining the mood entirely, eating both of the backstage passes. Sometimes I just want to smack them all into Timbuktu. They both end up losing their seats and get kicked out, but they sneak into the backstage room. Squidward and Sponge play music to try to get in, and Kelpie G loves SpongeBob's ukulele playing so much that he gets to play with him on stage. This is just another Torture Squidward episode featuring soothing music. 32. Bubble Troubles. This episode is just nothing for 5 minutes. It takes forever to get started. Sponge and Pat are blowing spicy bubbles, and after destroying Squidward with a big one, they ruin Sadie's tree dome and she's running low on air. She starts to go cuckoo crazy as she only has a few minutes left, and is barely surviving off air from the Krusty Krab ceiling, Pearl's head, and Mr. Krab's shell. So SpongeBob blows a big bubble of air and puts it in the tree dome, solving the problem. Or apparently not, because the tree dome is lifted in the air from the bubble. When the hell did this happen? It was clearly inside the tree dome before. This is one of the most brain-dead episodes I've seen, but it did make me laugh a few times, so I'll give it points for that. 31. The Good Krabby Name. Mr. Krabs finds everyone in Bikini Bottom that is eating Krusty Krab, and wants the last 2% to take a visit. So Sponge and Patrick graffiti all over Bikini Bottom with that message, and it just goes on and on for the rest of the episode. It's the most obnoxious ad campaign you can imagine, but it does work. You see something enough times, you're much more inclined to remember and even try out the product. That's just how our brains work. I didn't really find this one all that funny, but the plot was alright, I suppose. 30. Move It or Lose It. The Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket are 99 feet away from each other, when it's supposed to be 100, so one of them has to get bulldozed. I've seen Mr. Krab pick up the Krusty Krab many times. He could just slide it 1 foot back himself, but we know that logic wouldn't apply today. So instead, whoever gets the most signatures from a petition keeps their restaurant. SpongeBob is asking around, but nobody cares what happens. So Plankton decides to pay people to sign for him, despite not having any money. So his plan is to sell all his inventions and give the money back for signatures. That is a pretty big break for Plankton. He's risking it for the biscuit. But what he doesn't know is that the bulldozing entails moving the Krusty Krab 1 foot back, and that's it. That's pretty much what I just proposed. I'm kind of surprised that's what they went with. I don't mind this episode. I don't think I'll recall it ever in the future, but it was a fun enough watch. 29. For Hero to Go. Mr. Krabs is a jar of seeds. Whoever guesses the right amount wins a free Krabby Patty. I'm surprised he's not charging for people to guess. Plankton wants to guess, of course, but Krabs won't let him. So he calls the bogus business bureau to complain of his unfair treatment. The BBB threatens to close down the Krusty Krab, and Plankton guesses the seed count correctly. After a bunch of stalling, they give Plankton the patty, but he has to swallow it before leaving. After Karen cuts him open, they try to sell it, but it's just not the right recipe with his stomach acids. Honestly, I really wish Plankton wasn't involved in this one. It would have been a lot more interesting if some random customer guessed correctly and tried to sell the patty on his own. Or who knows what they could have done with that twist. 28. Below Bikini Bottom. Squidward is playing clarinet, and SpongeBob feels the need to join in. Some manager/promoter hears them and starts singing about how great they are. And hot damn, his song's actually catchy. The only problem is Squidward doesn't want to tour with SpongeBob, and Mr. Krabs takes over, which is super lame. I really like the guy. Now we gotta put up with Krabs' cheapness for 54 minutes. Because yes, this is a double special. After stealing the bus and Patrick turning into a roadie, we get to a concert and the manager guy is there mocking him. Why the hell isn't he in charge? You know, I'm on his side. Let's just say that Krabs has gone off because on the Krusty Krab for this tour, bruh. And they don't even go to normal concert places, but instead the supermarket and a retirement home. Wow, how impressive. After making a fake sign for Ned and the Needlefish, Krabs manages to steal the spotlight at an actual concert only for SpongeBob and Squidward to get moved off stage. Again, none of this would have happened if he hadn't taken over. What a moron. Now that Mr. Krabs is broke and they got stranded in the middle of nowhere, Squidward quits and starts walking home, but not before one more song, which again is pretty darn catchy. Krabs gets what he deserves in the end, which is nice to see, but otherwise, I don't think this needed to be such a long episode. There's a good amount of filler for an idea that could have been fit in 11 minutes. 27. It's a SpongeBob Christmas. I'm not sure how this could top Christmas Who, but I'll give it a chance. At least this intro has some pretty stunning visuals, reminiscent of Santa Claus is Coming to Town from the 70s. Patchy is the mailman. He slips on a board and spins out of control. He ends up with a flat tire and is stuck out in the cold all night and starts hallucinating. There's a cave which he believes has Santa, but it's just a terrifying polar bear. As dumb as this patchy segment is, it's at least more interesting to watch because of the change in visuals. The SpongeBob intro is also remixed like Christmas Who's was, but instead of beautiful opera singers, it's a child choir. I get this is a kid's show, but I would have preferred if they just reused what they did for Christmas Who, since it sounds way better. Also, this one episode in particular for this season is in widescreen. That's pretty wonky considering the rest of the park, but alright, sure. That's when I really noticed the art style. Oh my god, it's just like Camp Coral. I bet Camp Coral used this episode's assets as a base. They're strikingly similar. While SpongeBob sings a song about Christmas, he goes from place to place, and everything looks pretty good actually. Besides Patrick being kinda slimmed down, this art style works relatively well. It's definitely not as expressive, but for a special, I think it's fine. But as for the plot, Plankton creates Jerktonium, which he puts in fruitcake to make everyone evil. It doesn't work on SpongeBob, but it does with everyone else in town. It's so strange that everyone wants to eat fruitcake after the last Christmas special made a huge point of not eating it, but
Need cash, but aren't sure how? Video games are worth top dollar cash at disc traders.
But yeah, since the fruitcake doesn't affect SpongeBob, Plankton's got a robot version of him that's evil. And somehow, nobody notices how different he looks. SpongeBob starts to realize how mean everyone is acting, so he goes to seek for help. After dropping some fruitcake in our analyzer, they load in the Jerktonium, and the solution is to sing a song. I'm about halfway through this, and this just doesn't feel like much of a Christmas episode. I'm definitely a little bit biased because I grew up with the older episodes, but I just don't feel the charm at all. The songs aren't as good, Santa isn't a mystery, the story is rushing its way to the end. It's not completely awful, but it doesn't feel all that special. By the end, Santa's about to get everyone coal until Robo Sponge comes along to dry him. SpongeBob comes to the rescue by firing fruitcakes at it, proving that Plankton was evil all along. I can tell a ton of effort was poured into this, but I just don't see myself wanting to watch this ever again. 26. Glove World Rip. One of Glove World's rides crashes into SpongeBob's house. I'm not even gonna try to imagine how that was possible, but the fish want the place to be closed down. So Sponge and Pat visit for the last time. You know, after seeing so many Glove World episodes, how cool would it be if one day Nickelodeon made Glove World a real place and you could ride the fiery Fisto Pain? Man, that would be awesome. But as they try out all the rides one last time, they're all kind of falling apart. Even the Ferris wheel makes a run for it. After they try to fix the place up, it turns out Glove Universe isn't a replacement. Once again, it just wasn't all that entertaining to watch. People getting hurt on the rides is the only gag for the entire episode. 25. Home Sweet Bubble. SpongeBob's pineapple's falling apart, and I gotta say, the visuals of it melting away are really damn impressive compared to what we usually see. SpongeBob calls for Patrick's help, but he's having to believe that he's working in a huge office. I don't know why this cracks me up. It's just so funny since you can only hear him through the phone in his video. Squidward also ends up helping by being the support system, while Sandy and Krabs help rebuild. They end up making, something, alright, but they completely forgot that Squidward was there the entire time. While the episode goes along, Gary keeps asking to be fed, and at the end, it turns out he was holding a can that would recreate the pineapple in an instant. This is a lot like Home Sweet Pineapple from Season 1, but with a bit of a different spin on it. I don't mind this episode, actually. it was nice to see his friends at least attempt to help. 24. Mr. Krabs takes a vacation. That's right, it's vacation picture time. Mr. Krabs announces he's closing the Krusty Krab for vacation. I busted a gut when Squidward Rejoice and Hallelujah started playing, and for some reason, Krabs invites SpongeBob with. What on earth is he thinking? Pearl doesn't want Sponge going with for obvious reasons, and they end up going to the Mint, where all the money is made. Pearl was not pleased when they passed Planet Roller Coaster. I mean, hey, that place looking pretty sweet, but at the Mint, the tour guide does his thing, and Mr. Krabs is kind of obnoxious the whole time. He tries stealing the money, then cries a river when it's shredded. I swear, sometimes he's got the personality of a frickin' 3-year-old. But suddenly, robbers start stealing the money, so Mr. Krabs uses SpongeBob to flick them out and save the day. They get some fancy dollar bills that Pearl takes to buy some shoes. This episode is all over the place. 1 minute it's painful, the next it's hilarious. I don't know how I feel about it overall. 23. The Googly Artiste. Patrick wants to make art like SpongeBob and Squidward, and he's tested to put some googly eyes on a rock. While he's, making art, Frederick sees Squidward's sculpture and hates it. And of course, Frederick gives Patrick $500 for his googly rock. In fact, Patrick sells tons of these rocks until he runs out. That's when he runs to the Krusty Krab and slaps googly eyes on the patties. He sells so well that Mr. Krabs takes over Patrick's business. What a jackass. Patrick really should have copyrighted his product. This is a very dumb episode, which would have been fine if it were more entertaining, but it just feels like the story is forced to move forward. 22. Sentimental Sponge. Spring has begun to the bottom, which means it's time for spring cleaning. But Patrick doesn't understand why SpongeBob's throwing away so much stuff, which convinces SpongeBob to become a hoarder. He gets so bad that he's saving things like grease and sweat.
Okay, this is one of the ones I actually have seen, and I like it.
So the sanitation police tells him to get rid of his junk or vacate his premises. Squidward suggests he use of all his stuff, which is actually kind of thoughtful of him. After getting rid of the junk, the house is now filled to the brim with photos of all the junk, and not so surprising for the Mets. This episode is fine enough, but it didn't make me laugh at all. 21. House sitting for Sandy. Oh, right. I forgot Gary secretly has ultra-realistic hands. Sandy needs SpongeBob to watch her treat him for the day, giving him an extremely long list of things to follow. And I guess now that Patrick will show up to ruin everything. I'm about halfway through these episodes. You can tell that fresh ideas are running low since plot lines keep being repeated from older episodes. This one is very similar to Wormy. Oh wow, Patrick does show up. Man, I'm so good at guessing, aren't I? Oh wow. And what is up with SpongeBob look like a damn zombie when he needs water? How did he even forget about the helmet after all this time? I've got more questions than answers, okay? As you'd expect, Patrick distracts SpongeBob and the robots break out and start destroying everything. I gotta be honest, this is kind of Sandy's fault for having all these robots for no reason. But she comes back with a gun and shoots everything back to normal, which leads SpongeBob to destroying everything again, and a robot breaks this gun. As predictable as this plot was, it was at least an enjoyable one to watch. 20. Fiasco. SpongeBob is storyboarding and Krabs doesn't care for it. After personally working with storyboards the past year, it's very surreal to see them inside a cartoon. They're looking for a gimmick for the restaurant, and while that's happening, Squidward spots Fiasco, a really famous artist that draws surreal art. He made something and left, and now the piece is for the people to look at. Plankton thinks he can reverse engineer the ingredients, however, so he attempts to steal it, but is chased by the cops. At some point, Patrick and Squidward end up in SpongeBob's house, and Patrick eats the Fiasco. And somehow Squidward's in jail? He literally did nothing. I actually like the idea of this episode a lot. It just wasn't all that humorous. 19. Free samples. Plankton thinks he can draw in customers with free samples of his junk, and he sure does, while also managing to poison everyone with his sludge. Except Patrick, who eats the rest of them up. So what does Plankton do? Goes back to selling free samples, but claims that they're Krabby Patties. I also hate how all of them have Band-Aids on them. That's the nastiest part of this whole thing. Sponge and Krabs try giving away their actual Krabby Patties, and nobody's buying into it. That is, until SpongeBob calls them new and all returns to normal. It goes to show that it's not about what you got, it's how you present what you got. Well, this episode had a basic idea, it was a decent enough watch. 18. Squidward's School for Grown-Ups. Sponge and Patrick scream at voters for fun. Okay. When suddenly, Patrick gets a beard after falling asleep. Squidward notices and decides to teach him how to be grown-ups and mature. SpongeBob's not really getting with the program, although Patrick is only somewhat going with the flow. This change breaks up the friendship, which we all know won't last. Squid and Pat go to an opera house, only to be greeted by SpongeBob in costume singing like an absolute god. This awakens the viewer, which was actually just a sea urchin the whole time. This episode's plot got really solid after the screaming shenanigans at the beginning. I liked it. 17. Oral Report. This random fish slowly falling out of existence summarizes my thoughts on watching this season of SpongeBob. The customers are extremely hungry, and SpongeBob is paranoid about public speaking. He goes to get help from Patrick, but it only makes him more nervous. That's when Sandy whips up some goggles that lets him see everyone in their undies. He brings them to class, only for Patrick to clean the goggles, which ruins them. He can see everyone in their underwear, but they also have angry talking faces, which makes SpongeBob drive away, get caught by the cops, finally recite his speech, and Mrs. Puff goes to jail. It's just tradition that she ends up in jail somehow. Public speaking can be difficult for a lot of people, but it gets a lot easier when you're older because you realize that the people you're speaking for you'll never see again anyway. This was a decent watch with a few good jokes thrown in too. 16. A friendly game. SpongeBob and Patrick are gonna go golfing.
Okay, this is a good one.
Well, that's a nice change of pace, except that it's raining and they can't go out. So instead, they make a golf course in SpongeBob's house. There's a few moments in here that really had me laughing, which is super rare in the newer episode. And the mini golf courses that were made were pretty creative. It gets completely off track though when the balls are shot into Squidward's house. They completely destroy his place since they have to play the ball where it lies. Interestingly, it didn't seem like they were torturing Squidward this time, since they technically didn't wake him up from noise as requested. Also, Squidward has dentures. I never would have guessed that. Just for the sheer novelty, this was a decent one to watch. 15. Are you happy now? SpongeBob really likes reading work schedule book. There are happy memories for him, which makes Squidward realize that he doesn't have any. SpongeBob tries his best to cheer him up, and he really does put in a valiant effort, but nothing seems to help. It gets to the point where Squidward traps himself in his house for weeks. He even got a little worried when he threw some rope up, but he was just heating up a scour. What ends up making him happiest is getting to rip up a bunch of cliche SpongeBobs. So hey, I guess he found something that works. While I felt really bad for Squidward, it was nice to see SpongeBob being caring again, and Patrick not getting involved ruining everything. 14. Plankton's good eye. Plankton hides in a pickle jar to get the formula, but ends up getting beaten by Mr. Krabs. So Karen suggests getting another eye to help with his depth perception. He isn't able to get his extra eye to work because he needs a teardrop from someone with 2 eyes. And lucky for him, in this show, everyone cries all the time. After growing SpongeBob's eye, he goes out to steal the formula, but forgets about it as his DNA is corrupted with SpongeBob's, or as Karen puts it, evil. He gets his hand on the formula and gives it back to Mr. Krabs, so he's got to get rid of that eye. This role reversal with Plankton has kind of been done before, but not quite like this, and it's tripping me out. The town thanks Plankton for all his good deeds, and after a solid hug, the eye pops out. I actually like this one. It was a nice change of pace, despite not being all that humorous. 13. Super evil aquatic villain team-up is go, or see if it should for short. The lawyer from season 4 makes a cameo. That's kinda cool. SpongeBob finds Plankton crying because his doomsday device doesn't work. So Sponge suggests joining the club and making some friends, which leads him to partner up with Man Ray. SpongeBob tries to get help, but he gets a little distracted by some old ladies at the Shady Shoal. Meanwhile, Man Ray and Plankton are at the Krusty Krab, but Man Ray is addicted to Krabby Patties. I also love how the entire time, he's basically just hanging out doing whatever. Plankton talks to him while he's adding canned bread to a vending machine, and he's just like, oh yeah, I'm listening, no, I don't know. Just the way he's acting is so funny to me. Man Ray is just straight up vibing, and eats so many patties that he fails at helping get the formula. This was a really goofy episode, all in all. 12. Karen 2.0. Plankton makes another Karen, right in front of the old Karen. Why not just upgrade the parts in your old wife instead? Either way, Plankton is basically cheating, and that's messed up, man. He throws classic Karen away, and Krabs takes her since she's just laying out on the street. Karen ends up working as the cashier, and wow, this episode has aged really well. Most cashiers are automated nowadays. Sucks for Squidward, though, that he got demoted to janitor. Karen 2 and classic Karen get in an argument at the Krusty Krab. Their insults are just so stupid and goofy. They also get in a fight, and classic Karen wins. That's when Plankton realizes his mistakes. It's a surprisingly heartwarming ending. I like this episode mostly because it was a story about Plankton that didn't really involve the formula for once. 11. The Way of the Sponge. Sandy has Fuzzy Acorns visiting to get the highest belt in karate. SpongeBob wants the belt too, and does some tests to try and get it. He has to fight Sandy for the belt and get this sweet montage of SpongeBob training. Although he doesn't get any sleep whatsoever, he comes to the match exhausted. He does so poorly that Muzzy pulls down the belt with his pants. Sandy is a little imagine. It's really nice to see an episode that flows and has a lot of fun action sequences to watch. He ends up going to the Krusty Krab, and thanks to SpongeBob working hard and kicking Fuzzy's ass, he gets himself a belt. This is the most lenient sensei of all time, but hey, at least he recognizes talent when he sees it. I quite like this one. There's so many great action shots. 10. Chum Takase. SpongeBob is struggling to clock out while Squidward is disgusted by the Krusty Krab. In fact, he decides to run his own restaurant with Plankton to prove to Krabs he can do a much better job. Squidward makes Chum Fricasse, which is Grandma's recipe that makes chum really tasty. The chum bucket changes to a chum moquette, which is almost as good as Chum is Bum. It's now a fancy-looking place where Squidward serving his delicious chum, and everyone loves it. Krabs and SpongeBob investigate, only to get made fun of and out of the place. But the fame gets to Squidward's head as he starts serving the chum before it's ready. The problem with it being undercooked is that it causes serious stomach aches. Grandma says so herself, so he goes back to the Krusty Krab as the doormat. Squidward had this coming. He literally had everything he could have wanted, not greed. What a solid watch. It wasn't really all that
very nice and akin to how YouTubers and other people do on social media. Oh hey, it's not enough. You can't help yourself. You gotta take it one step too far.
funny, but it was really great seeing Squidward create such a big impression on Bikini Bottom. 9. The Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom. Based off the title, this sounds like it's gonna be stupid. Krabs looking for treasure and notices Sandy's giant bean. It's super weird to see these two interact, and I kind of love it. The bean is huge because of a growth serum she's making, so SpongeBob brings over a patty and they dump the entire serum on it to see if it'll grow. And boy does it grow! It turns into a goddamn monster. It eats the freaking Krusty Krab and invades town. I gotta say, I was not expecting such a solid episode out of this. Basically, Sandy flies Sponge and Pat to the patty, and SpongeBob has to touch it to absorb the entire thing, which lets Krabs do exactly what he wanted in the end, sell an overgrown patty from SpongeBob. This was by far the most creative Krusty Krab plot I've seen in quite some time. 8. Treats. A commercial plays for stale bites, and that is the only phrase repeated in the commercial. It's supposed to be funny. Personally, I was just waiting for it to end because it was just kind of the same shots looped over and over. But SpongeBob ends up buying some snail bites for Gary, and his snail gets a tad bit addicted to these treats. I mean, he lifts 1,000 pounds with his eyes for some snail bites. Holy shit, dude. I'm sure there's something in them that makes them addicting, but this is also SpongeBob's fault for being a feeder. It turns out there are no more snail bites, not even at the factory where they make them. So SpongeBob flies around the world looking for a box of snail bites. I have to admit, that's some serious dedication, which is really uplifting. I mean, that's a lot of love for your pet. They don't end up finding a box, so Patrick actually gives him some good advice. Just say no. And guess what? It actually works perfectly. I really enjoyed this one. It can be difficult to say no to the people you love, but sometimes you have to know your limits. 7. Vacation. And now it's time for Sandy's vacation slides, because every character in this season needs a vacation arc. Immediately, it starts off exactly like Sandy's rocket from Season 1. She's even going to the moon again, except this time it's for vacation instead of collecting samples. The plot beats are strikingly similar, but things pick up in the second half. SpongeBob's cake messes up a ventilator thing, so Sandy has to climb outside the rocket to fix it. Then they end up moon crater boarding on a real-life looking moon, which is a lot of fun to watch, but SpongeBob manages to hit the fuel tank by accident. They manage to make it back to Earth, but it's a pretty close call. It's the kind of vacation Sandy would have wanted anyway, dangerous and out of control. In a way, I almost enjoy this more than Sandy's rocket. It's way more creative in a lot of aspects. 6. The Hot Shot. A nice car shows up at Mrs. Puff's boating school, and it's some race car celeb dropping off his son for school. This guy can drive perfectly, so I'm not really sure why he's here to begin with, but at least he's got a killer hairdo. Mrs. Puff has Tony Fast Jr. drive with SpongeBob, and he manages to slow him down, and SpongeBob goes into his house, and they decide to drive one of his dad's fancy boats. It's really funny how much of this reminds me of my attitude as a teenager. The episode itself has been really funny too. I got a chuckle out of Mrs. Puff taking up Jr. to kiss him after what he'd done. They run into another group of teenagers, and I just love how SpongeBob's being completely oblivious to the fact that he's getting made fun of. It feels like his old self. He ends up racing these other people. He gets caught by the cops and crashes into the boating school. It's interesting to see SpongeBob drive so well. It goes to show that he just likes confidence, which is why he fails the exam every time. Boating school episodes are always such huge misses or huge wins. In This one secured it up. 5. Planet of the Jellyfish. It's time for more jellyfishing, with a big scary alien that turns jellyfish into zombie things. These jellyfish can eat other fish and turn them into zombies as well. The imagery's intense. We also talk about this shot of SpongeBob laying in his underwear eating popcorn on the couch. This is what living's all about. I wish I could do this more often. The next day, we're at the Krusty Krab and a guy wants extra mayo, and all the zombies get hissy with him. I'm assuming mayo's their weakness, but I guess we'll see what happens. The alien from earlier has everyone in sacks in the freezer? Oh dear God. Sponge and Sandy team up and start spraying mayonnaise at the clones, which dissolves them into nothing. After hitting the alien with mayo, things return to normal. And yes, Krabs telling the freaking new stuff is a very normal thing to see. This was a super fun episode, despite its predictable ending with a lot of tension and suspense. It was a blast to watch. 4. Mermaid Man begins. There's a Mermaid Man in Barnacle Boy Marathon, but it's ruined when SpongeBob's house falls apart from a strong wind. They decide to see the real Mermaid Man instead, and let's just say there's some memory issues. The story keeps changing over and over. Mermaid Man got some starfish that lets him breathe underwater, and Barnacle Boy had some barnacles shoved into his body. But apparently, according to the show, what actually happened is the most epic, over-the-top story of all time. They were eating some popcorn at their apartment. A radioactive ant bites Mermaid Man, causing him to trip and they fall out of their living quarters. That's when they land in a vat of acid. An alien knocks that over, causing a wave during a solar eclipse on a leap year. A bomb explodes, launching them into the air, only to get zapped by neon blade lightning. And a magical crystal with wings comes out during an earthquake that flies them into a billboard, which knocks them back into their apartment. I couldn't make this up if I tried. The sheer absurdity just gets funnier the longer it goes on. This is by far one of the most entertaining Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episodes. 3. A SquarePants Family Vacation. SpongeBob invites everyone over for different types of parties. I wonder what's going to come out of this. He literally just wants to showcase pictures from his family trip, like everyone else. And this is a double special, so there must be something here worth a watch. And well, bizarre things sure do happen. Patrick goes on this family road trip with SpongeBob and his parents to the Great Barrier Reef. And while they're sitting in the car, Patrick decides to play hide-and-go-seek. This entails Patrick to jump in front of the window, spin the car out, crash through a mall, fly up into the water to the point of reaching a space and finding a cow, then coming back down right to where they started. It doesn't get more absurd than that, let me tell you. So they resort to singing road trip songs, and it's honestly pretty catchy. You gotta love Patrick keeping beat. Row, row, row. The car ends up breaking down and they have to push it to the next service station. While the car is getting fixed, Sponge and Patrick play on the playground and somehow end up going down a water chute in a healthy forest. There's monsters all over the place, so they keep running away, bouncing off plants and swinging on vines. It's a lot more action-packed than I was expecting. My favorite part is this random gift shop, considering SpongeBob calls it a tourist trap and proceeds to waste all his money. I honestly thought the gift shop was a setup to warn the monsters to get them, but no, it's just a random-ass store in the middle of nowhere that exists for this one joke. After tons of walking, they make their way out of the forest, but don't realize that and just keep on chugging along. The song SpongeBob plays is so soothing that the scary fly ends up giving them a ride back. What a strange episode this was, but there were some good jokes and it was a fun watch overall. Definitely one of the highlights of season 8. 2. Sponge and Patrick live in the clouds until a flying houseboat appears. Patrick thinks it's all lame and fake, so they walk inside. If you pause the frame when the inside zooms out, the floor looks eerily similar to the main floor of the expansion. Surprisingly, this is not the Flying Dutchman's ship, it's other ghosts entirely. They got a pretty decent song number as well. It's nice that they're starting to get better compared to seasons 5 through 7. Patrick still doesn't believe they're real, so he can't show pizza, which finally starts to change. The ghost asks if they can pick up a head gasket, which is the only reason they're in Bikini Bottom. He's taking their souls until they get it. I gotta say, I'm really liking these ghosts a lot. They're really fun characters, and it's a nice change of pace from just having Flying Dutchman every time. So what does SpongeBob do? He goes to Mr. Krabs with a new moon. What were they thinking? They tell Mr. Krabs about the head gasket, and this mofo goes to a car, rips it out, and the camera slowly pans out to some guy yelling, "Hey!" This was the funniest shit I've seen in quite a while from this show. But anyway, Krabs and Sandy want to hunt these ghosts, which seems like a bad idea. And when they get back, SpongeBob returns the gasket, and as everyone tries to escape with the gold, this ghost opens a void and sucks them in. This void is their own personal hell. Your worst nightmare comes true depending on what you desire the most. Sandy manages to suck them out, and it turns out the gold actually belongs to the Flying Dutchman, I honestly did not expect him to get involved with this. What a twist. Now that the Dutchman has caught them, he traps everybody in the void, working at the Krusty Krab for forever. What a wild episode this was. It was by far one of the most entertaining double specials in some time. 1. Frozen Face-Off. And it's time for yet another Double Trouble delight. There's a sleigh race happening with a $1 million cash prize. I like seeing
this one I've seen. This one's really good.
everyone's versions of the sleighs too. Patrick's gummy worms are of course the best. Plankton is pretending to be in the race too, but is instead using it as an scapegoat to reach the formula. The race goes on for a bit, and it's not going too well. In fact, everyone ends up in SpongeBob's sleigh and gets trapped in a snowy dead-end. Not even Squid's hilarious imported snail was a success. That's when the gang meets the abominable sea mollusk. This guy's design is really badass. Sponge and friends manage to escape, but they forgot Squidward. So as they're going back, Mr. Krabs escapes to try to win the race. But eventually, everyone gets frozen except Sandy, who has to unthaw them using the wood of the sleigh. This story is going everywhere, and I love how insane it gets. Karen admits that Plankton set up the whole race to steal the formula, and when they finally get back, he actually manages to steal it. That's pretty crazy. Plankton has legitimate success for once in his life. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't know how bottle openers work, and ends up in the abominable sea mollusk's stomach as he's mistaken for a jelly bean. This was by far one of the most interesting snowy SpongeBob episodes I've seen since the original 3 seasons. It had me laughing several times, and the best part was Plankton splitting an atom and there's just this big-ass explosion. It's timed so impeccably. This episode is actually worth watching. Well, at least SpongeBob's getting funnier again.
Let me see.
I mean, Season 8 is definitely better than 6 or 7, but a lot of the problems from 6 and 7 are still in Season 8, but at the very least, I'm laughing at the jokes again. So it feels like things might be taking a turn for the better. You know, now that we're getting into Season 9, we're officially having widescreen for everything. The double specials were really good in Season 8, so maybe we'll see that in Season 9. Let's see how it goes.
I imagine he recorded that little tidbit before he freaking actually had watched Season 9.
49. SpongeBob, you're fired. Time for another double special. This time, Mr. Krabs fires SpongeBob to save a dude. There has to be more to this, right? I mean, he literally hates the food. My brain can't handle how stupid this decision is, and Krabs eats it. And SpongeBob cries for several minutes. My god, this is such a waste. Patrick introduces him to being unemployed. SpongeBob is a mess. I mean, I would be too. I can't stand not working on something. So Sandy tells him to find new work. He goes to New Year's, another fun callback. He makes mini patties and gets fired for doing so. Man, the ending is so frick.
I have seen this one out. I strongly disagree with him having a solo on the bar because I love this episode.
Predictable. Y'all know what's gonna happen. Why is this over 20 minutes long? Anyway, he keeps getting fired making his own version of food. So he comes home and makes Gary homemade snail po, which apparently is super delicious. All the customers work, as the owner is trying to force him back to work since the customers liked it so much. And then a Krabby Patty suit comes in to save the day. If I had to guess, it's Squidward. Yeah, why is it SpongeBob got his job back? You know what would have been a cool twist? If SpongeBob sold his homemade snail po and made his own business. But instead, it's the most uninspired ending of all time. 48. Krabs. Squidward is doing nothing at work while SpongeBob is doing a bunch of chores. I was kind of surprised to see actual references to the gift of gum. Can't wait for the Splitter to get a reference in the future. But basically, Krabs talks about the Yeti crab who feeds on lazy workers, and wow, he's actually real. It turns out he just wanted a Krabby Patty. This is the most nothing episode I've seen yet. Next. 47. Beyond the Krusty. We got a ripped current coming through, and Krabs is not concerned about it. In fact, he's not letting anyone leave unless they spend money. See, this is what I'm talking about when Krabs goes way too overboard with his greed. It's not fun to watch him eat the dick all the time. As this is happening, the current picks up the Krusty Krab and SpongeBob turns the place into a ship. But Krabs is stuck in a barrel and gets launched outside. So Squidward becomes captain, and they land in some exotic place with a monster. He ends up getting eaten and Krabs returns, but is in a
Like, I actually ended up, like, in the past month or so, I ended up seeing this episode for the first time myself.
Pissy mood because nobody will meet him to help. This is as bad as SpongeBob having no sympathy for Gary when he was about to be eaten. He's being so obnoxiously greedy that all you can do is hate him. He only ends up helping because SpongeBob threatens to spend his first time, and then Krab beats up the monster. This episode was awful. It wasn't funny at all, and the whole thing is a mess. happens. 46. Little Yellow Book. SpongeBob is writing in his diary and doesn't want Squidward to see what's inside. After fooling him to make a delivery, he reads it and is surprised that SpongeBob is delusional. Since when is this news to you? Squid gets into the nitty-gritty and starts exposing SpongeBob's secrets to the public. While this is happening, SpongeBob takes a bubble break instead of a smoke break. Holy shit, this had me cackling. That is so damn goofy. Eventually, though, SpongeBob finds out that Squidward was reading his diary out loud and gets super upset. Unlike the Equals and Evil, Squidward has no remorse, and I mean no remorse. He loses his damn house because of this, and is even chained out in public. Despite all that, he still doesn't care and reads SpongeBob's secret personal diary. There were a few good jokes in here, but wow, Squidward really went off the deep end. I think all that harassment he got in the past few seasons broke him for good. 45. Lost in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob wants to take a shortcut to work, despite it literally being in bird's eye view. He tries to find it and gets lost, so he spends the rest of the episode.
It was either earlier this year or sometime last year I'd seen this episode for the first time, and man do I love it.
Episode finding his way back.
Well, first and only. I love this episode a lot. It was really good.
He's covered in trash though, so Sponge is told to go home, and Squidward tries to make himself dirty so he can go home. Well, that sure was the episode of SpongeBob. That was an episode, alright. 44. It came from Goo Lagoon. We start off in Goo Lagoon, and Sponge and Patrick are floating on bubbles. After bouncing on them for a while, Sandy comes out in a robot suit warning of how dangerous they are. But nobody gives a f**k about what she's saying, which is really odd because people usually listen to her about these kinds of things. But anyway, Plankton makes it worse by allowing more goo to come from the bottom of the ocean and forms a massive bubble. He manages to take control of it, and actually gets pretty far with his plan of blackmailing Krabs for the formula. SpongeBob fights back with a massive macho bubble dude that launches Plankton and the bubble to space, but they bounce off the moon and come back as if nothing happened. So Krabs gives in to save the town by handing the formula to Plankton. He pops the bubble anyway, and the formula has TNT in it. Why was this a double feature? This ending is so lame. It reminds me of Patrick's gumball, but it affects everybody instead of just one stream. Literally all that happened is the town got covered in goo. It doesn't seem to actually be toxic. This was a pretty bad episode all around. 43. Squid Baby. Squidward is relaxing. I wonder what'll happen next. Here we go. This time, Sponge and Patrick are pretending to be babies. As Squidward scolds them, he trips on a toy car and smashes his head, which turns his brain into a baby. The doctor says that he has to so I guess SpongeBob and Patrick have to take care of him now. They do a pretty awful job in this. They're supposed to protect his head, but do everything they can to injure him instead. This episode is not very good overall, but it does have a couple funny moments. Once Squidward is at the Krusty Krab and is given a pen and paper, he starts drawing all over them and even on the customers' faces. Something about the flow is cracking me up. But this all ends with getting cured with a bunch of ice cubes on his head. So, like any injury, just use ice or you'll turn into a baby. Yeah, that's the lesson here. I don't know. I'm not really a fan of this episode, especially with
What's the lesson here? What's the lesson here? It's not like it's a Friendship is Magic episode.
Mr. Krabs being such a dick like he always is in his recent seasons. 42. Cuter Sauce. I know these episodes are ranked worst to best, but I've been watching them in order, and I swear this is like the 7th Krusty Krab themed episode. I am so tired of this. Someone orders a Krabby Patty out of patties for the same price as a normal one, and Krabs freaks out. It turns out that SpongeBob failed his boiling exam and he's just in a bad mood messing things up. So Mr. Krabs decides to teach SpongeBob himself. It goes swimmingly, as you can see by Mr. Krabs' rearview mirror. Nothing called it anything happens. But man, is it nice to see Mr. Krabs act kind of. He's actually thinking about someone else besides himself for once. Well, kind of. But yeah, SpongeBob keeps messing up.
Yeah, kind of, because it's still the ulterior motive of continuing to make money.
So Krabs has Gary drive to show how he can do it. He gets caught and is forced back to boating school. So I guess this wasn't exactly a Krusty Krab episode, but nothing interesting happened. It's SpongeBob failing again, but Krabs is the teacher instead of Mrs. Puff. 41. Lame and Fortune. Cargo drops behind SpongeBob's house filled with fortune cookies. He takes them to the Krusty Krab, of course, and Squidward wins a bunch of money for being miserable. And Krab takes it from him. I swear to God, he really has become the worst character in this show. But alas, the fortune cookies are actually coming true for everyone. Even Fred, the infamous My Lane guy. So what must happen next? Plankton writes a bunch of mean stuff on fortune cookies and replaces them with the real ones. This plan works so well that he convinces Krabs he's gonna die if he doesn't give him the formula. As SpongeBob tries to take over and skip people, he gets so impatient that he admits the fortune to all lines. Why the hell did he do that? That's seriously how this ends? Why didn't Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob make up their own fortune cookie lines? Lame and fortune. This episode is pretty lame. 40. Sold. Patrick discovers what scams are and believes he's forced to move out of his house with a guy in the commercial. He even fools SpongeBob, so they move out. Squidward is pretty damn happy about this change, but he only gets about 2 days of peace before Sponge and Pat want to visit. Squidward tries to draw them away without any success. He tries to fool them by pretending other people live there, but he gives up and explains that the guy on TV flips houses for profit. So of course, Sponge and Patrick flip his house. How thoughtful of them. I feel like I've seen this type of plot tons of times. Next. 39. Pineapple Invasion. Plankton tries to steal formula and fails. This time, it's the skunk. That is fantastic. The skunk manages to reach the entirety of the bottom, so Krabs decides to give SpongeBob the formula for safety. I'm pretty sure there's been a story similar to this one, but I'm like 300-ish episodes in, so I can't remember anymore. Plankton finds out what's going on and manages to get in SpongeBob's house, destroying the place. Gary tries to protect it, but can only do so much until he goes all home alone on it. Gary's shell is also a fourth dimension. Like, guys, I'm telling you, SpongeBob's universe is crazy. When SpongeBob gets home, the formula is safe on top of the TV, and they find Plankton in Gary's shell. This is just another Plankton Fails episode. I'm really getting tired of these. 38. Company Picnic. SpongeBob is making a story up with a bunch of patties. Mr. Krabs suggests that instead of wasting time with them, he makes unpaid workers, but he is being unproductive. So SpongeBob suggests a picnic. Man, you know, this show has officially gone on for too long. This is an actual plot about patties coming to life and they don't want to work. The cow's milk isn't just dried up, it's now been filled with dust and bad ideas. So Krabs decides the picnic is a good idea, and the blanket is a bunch of toilet paper while the food is condiments. I am not surprised by any of this. Plankton comes along with his Chumpini picnic, which is far superior to what Krabs has. Not that that would have been much of a challenge, but Squidward and Krabs are into it. That is until SpongeBob discovers everything is a hologram. I am not sure how that works.
I've seen this one, yay.
Exactly, but I wasn't expecting that twist, so hey, big props there. This episode really picked up once the picnic stuff began, but it's still just Plankton failing to get the formula yet again. 37. Bumper to Bumper. Oh boy, another boating school episode. The only thing worth mentioning are these guys that think they're watching a 3D show. Pretty amusing, I have to admit. I think even the show is aware of how often they use this plot, though. Mrs. Puff is on parole because of all the things that have happened to her in the past. Her idea is for SpongeBob to take the test somewhere else entirely. Yeah, she's going to jail. Calling it right now. Calling it. This idea of hers actually works until SpongeBob ends up getting off the road, and then somehow back on and he parks perfectly. But hey, as I predicted, she gets caught crossing the county line, she goes to jail. Kind of a boring episode all around. Like, I see an attempt at doing something different here, but it wasn't enough. 36. Food Con Castaways.
Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time for more Let's Play Pokemon next video. Darkness extra videos. I'm going to be leveling these two up to level 60 off screen. Bye, everybody.